IELTS scoring, how does it work? I'm Alex from E2 Language. I'm an IELTS expert, a former examiner, and in this video, I'm going to explain the whole thing to you. We'll go through listening, reading, speaking, and writing. I'll show you how your scores are worked out, and at the end, I'll show you how your overall band score is calculated. The IELTS scoring system is relatively simple compared to other language tests. It goes on a band scale from 0 to 9, where 0 means you didn't turn up to the test. 1 is labelled as a non-user, and it goes all the way up to band 9, expert user. Notice expert user, not native speaker. Let's start by looking at IELTS listening. Now, in IELTS listening, there are 40 questions, which means a maximum of 40 points because one question equals 1 point. And IELTS helpfully gives us a conversion table for equating your score out of 40 to a band. And it looks like this. And in fact, this is a simplified version. For a more detailed version, you can download it from the description below. By the way, this is the same for general and academic. You both do the same listening test. Now on the left here, we've got the score out of 40, and on the right is the band equivalent. So imagine you get 16 correct out of 40, then you're going to score band 5. Now this is not set in stone. These scores can go up and down a little bit depending on the difficulty of the test, but IELTS tells us this is a pretty good guide. So for those of you who are aiming for 7, you should be aiming at 30 or more correct every time you do a listening test. And aiming at 8, that needs to come up to 35 out of 40. Let's move on to IELTS reading. Now, as you probably know, general IELTS and academic IELTS have two different reading tests. So it's not like listening where everybody does the same. These are different tests and they're scored slightly differently as well. So here are the tables. We've got general on the left, academic on the right. And you'll notice that on the general side, to score band 7, you need 34 or around 34 out of 40 correct. Whereas for academic, it's a bit lower, just 30 out of 40. So even though the general test is considered easier, it's certainly shorter than the academic test. You need to get more points out of 40 to get the same score. So it's not really easier. And the same goes, of course, for band 8. For general, you need to be right up 38 plus, and for academic, just 35. So whenever you do a listening test or a reading test, you should use these tables to see how close you are to your band goal. IELTS speaking. Now, IELTS speaking is a completely different story, whereas the listening and reading tests are automatically marked, often by the computer, because there's a right answer and a wrong answer. When it comes to speaking and writing as well, these are human graded according to a criteria scale. So there is a little bit of subjectivity involved here. A speaking examiner uses a criteria sheet like this. These are the public band descriptors. I hope you've already seen them. If not, check out our video on the marking criteria, focusing on fluency and coherence, which is the first criterion. So the examiner gives you a score for your fluency and coherence, again, from 0 at the bottom up to 9, expert user up the top. You're also scored on your lexical resource, that's your vocab, your grammatical range and accuracy, and your pronunciation. When you get your score report, you'll have one single score for speaking, like 5.5 or 8, hopefully. But actually, the examiner gives you 4 separate scores. The examiner does not award you that final score. So they might give you something like this. Band 8 for fluency and coherence, 7 for lexical resource, 6 for grammar, and 7 for pronunciation. So your scores are not always going to be flat. They can go up and down. And how do we calculate that final score? Well, it's fairly simple. You just add them all together, 8 plus 7 plus 6 plus 7, that equals 28. Divide that by 4, and in this case, it comes to a nice round number, 7. Sometimes it will come to a not such a round number, like 7.75. In that case, it will come down to 7.5. Let's go into IELTS Writing. Works in much the same way, but in the writing test, there are 2 tasks. So there's a slightly added complication here. Again, the examiner uses criteria to score your work. There's a separate one for task 1 and for task 2. And each one has 4 criteria. Task achievement. In task 2, this is called task response. But in task 1, task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. For a more detailed breakdown of this criteria, in your course at E2 Language, we have videos on task 1 for general and academic, and you can find our video about the task 2 marking criteria here on YouTube. So for each task, the calculation works just like speaking, where you get your 4 scores added together, divided by 4, and it's usually rounded down to the nearest 0.5. So you might end up with scores that look like this. Task 1 could be 6.5. Task 2, where the candidate has got 8, 6, 5, 5, will come out to a band 6. Now, here's the complication. Task 1 is worth 1/3 of your score, and task 2 is worth 2/3 of your score. So to figure out your overall band score, and by the way, the examiner doesn't have anything to do with this. This happens after your exam. The examiner simply gives you those 4 scores for each task, but this is how it works. Task 1 plus task 2 plus task 2, so 2/3 of the weight for task 2, 1/3 of the weight for task 1, equals whatever, and divide that by 3. So in this case, we've got task 1, 6.5, task 2, 6, and add 6 again. That comes to 18.5, which we divide by 3, and it comes to 6.166. This will come down to a band 6 overall for writing. And that's the score that you get on your score report. So you have no idea, unless you get excellent feedback from someone like E2, you will have no idea what your criteria scores are. You will also have no idea what your task 1 score is compared to your task 2 score. So let's look at the overall score calculation. So you've got now 4 separate scores: reading, listening, speaking, writing. How do you get your end score? You can probably guess. Pretty simple. Just add your scores together. Reading plus writing plus listening plus speaking. In this case, let's imagine these are the scores: 6, 6.5, 7, and 8. This comes to a total of 27.5. And then we divide that by 4 to get the average. So in this case, it's 6.875. Now, in the individual tests, writing and speaking, that score will usually be rounded down. But for your overall score, it will go to the closest 0.5. So in this case, up to band 7 overall. And that's it. It's not that complicated after all. Don't forget to download your score conversion chart in the description below and practice hard. Make sure you get feedback on those subjective skills, speaking and writing, and come and study with me and my amazing team at e2language.com. See you there.